Hello and welcome to the JCN Clinic podcast show. My name's Jessica and today I am being joined by the lovely
Christine.
You heard it there. That is Christine Smith from the JCN Clinic joining me today. And we are doing an episode on the mistakes to avoid when trying to lose weight, which is going to be a goodie and an area that Christine works quite heavily in at the JCN Clinic. Are you stoked for this one?
Yeah, I'm super keen to get started.
Awesome. So if you haven't heard Christine on the podcast before, if you're a regular listener, you would have heard her plenty of times. But if she's new to you, you can go back through the episodes and learn more about Christine and her passion areas with practice. I've got quite a few fun episodes in the back catalogue there. But as I said, Christine does really do a lot with weight loss. So we thought this would be quite a interesting area to dive into. And we're going to keep it quite rapid fire, to use Christine's words today, as we move through these different areas. We've got 14 on the list, so we're really excited to share them with you. So I'll let Christine start. Our number one on the list, do you want to share that with our listeners?
Yeah, well, I thought the first one we can start with is probably one of the most obvious that a lot of people think of when it comes to weight loss, and that is calorie counting. So if you've been a follower of mine, perhaps for some time, you might have known my sort of stance when it comes to calorie counting. And I guess in the past, and even I suppose to current day, I do approach calorie counting with a bit of caution because I have found in the past with certain clients it can, I guess, impede on your relationship with food. However, that being said, I do think that there is a role for calorie counting, and this can kind of go both ways. I find that some people will either overdo it and all they're going to be focusing on is the calories. And where that can, I guess, become a problem is they may be heavily focused on calories, but they're not focused on, say, macronutrients, for example, which then is, I guess, a whole other issue when it comes to weight management. So we're wanting to look at specific macros, whether it's proteins or fats and things like that. And so they're sort of missing the mark and focusing too heavily on the counting of the calories. But then there is the flip side to that. And I see a lot of people that think, I'm following a healthy diet, it's really nutritious and well balanced, but they may still be over consuming when it comes to calories. And so there does still need to be, I guess, some thought behind the amount of calories that you're consuming if you are on a weight loss journey.
Yeah, great. That's really helpful as a starting point, and I definitely agree with calories. I think there is a space where counting calories and the use of calorie counting for particular clients and situations for them to figure out some of the sort of patterns of food can be useful, but also, yeah, we have to do it with respect to like the macronutrient intake and understanding food. I think realistically it highlights why it's really important to have guidance with a practitioner, because sometimes I know I've seen people who have just been calorie counting for so long and wondering why they're not getting anywhere. And then when you do actually have a look at like what they're consuming, like there's a lot more that meets the eye besides just the basics of calories that they are taking in, as you were alluding to with like their breakdown of protein, fats, fiber, etc., and how that is being used by the body metabolically. But as we said, we're going to move through these quick instead of getting too bogged down in just the one. So the next one on the list is being overly restrictive. This one is really fascinating. And again, something we see in clinic a lot, where you're wanting to, of course, lose weight. So particularly, I think if you are someone from the generation, maybe Gen X or even that boomer generation, I feel like this is very, very embedded there as far as to speak back to calories, cutting back on fat, just like restrict, 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 lower calorie, lower calorie. It really was that time back then when everything was advertised about being low calorie and pulling everything back. There was diets that were based on really low calorie intake. And even though I'm speaking with it with respect to those generation, it's still rife to today. Like you still see it. We see it in clinic a lot, where people will just think the answer is to restrict. And the problem with restricting is majorly two major areas. The first being that the more you restrict, the more often it will lead to cravings and essentially blowouts where you are so deprived that your energy drops and your blood sugar's all over the place, and all you can think about is food. And essentially your body is craving something to give you energy as quickly as possible, and often that will result in you hitting up highly processed or sugary foods because it's like quick energy and literally all that your brain's thinking about. And there'll often be an overconsumption. So you'll restrict, say a classic pattern might be restrict all through the day, and then you're like kind of blowing out and overeating in the evening. We see that a lot. Or it could be that you're restricting for like quite a few days, or you're on a diet as such that's very restrictive for a certain amount of time, but you can't stick to it. It leads to a blowout. So that's one side. And then the other pattern that we see with this, or the other, I guess, responses to why this is not conducive to long-term healthy weight loss, is that the more you restrict, the more that it sends detrimental messages back to your metabolism and how your hormones are controlling and helping ideally your metabolic rate on a daily basis. So it'll tend to slow everything down. Your thyroid will be like, oh my God, like I'm not being looked after, I'm not being nourished, like there's not enough food coming in here, let's just slow everything down. So it actually sends more of a negative feedback loop to your hormones, which ironically, if they were being fed correctly, would help support your weight loss in a healthy way. So yeah, that would be my number 2.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, and I think that very much actually ties into the third point that we've got, and that is going, or similar to the first and second, I should say, and that's going too low calorie. And I see this so often. And I often see it in, I suppose, what you were mentioning earlier, almost sort of like that boomer sort of generation as well. And yeah, they've either been restricting for so long, or they've been counting calories for so long, and they'll come in and they'll be eating less than half of what they should be eating from an energy density perspective. And, I guess that sort of ties back into that whole calorie picture. And it's like, it's so much more than like energy in versus energy out when it comes to, weight loss, particularly, because what we see is that, the metabolism adapts. And when you are consuming such low levels of calories over an extended period of time, like you said, everything does tend to slow down. And further to that, I feel like the issue also then leads you into this dark place. You've backed yourself into a corner so much that basically you've got no more wiggle room when it comes to sort of fleshing out the diet as well. So it's like if you've hit a plateau, which does often happen when we're doing, like a weight loss protocol, it's not like, oh, we can drop you even further because you're essentially eating nothing at that point. And so it's kind of twofold. You don't want to back yourself into a corner, so you've got no room to play with in terms of, can we drop you lower further, if that makes sense, to then shift that plateau. And then what we often have to do when this happens, because they may have been restricting for so long, is do a bit of almost reverse dieting. So we've got to start to taper up those calories very gradually and get the metabolism to sort of kick back into gear. And sometimes with that, there can be a little bit of a weight gain during that process, but it's almost necessary to sort of get you back to a stable level from a metabolic perspective. And then we can start to play around with dropping down or increasing activity and so on. So yeah, strongly encourage, if you are looking at calories or the energy density of your foods, then definitely get some guidance around that, because you may not even be aiming for the right target for you. You know, there's a lot of these online calculators and things like that. But yeah, it is a lot more complex than just that energy in versus energy out. So if you've been calorie counting for a long time and you just keep restricting, and you're now at a point where you're just barely eating anything and still not seeing results, that's when it's a bit of a red flag. And I would say, yeah, getting some qualified guidance around that is really helpful.
Yeah, for sure. I can think of a few clients over the years that have been very stuck on severe low calorie, and everything that you just said there, just absolutely not seeing any change with their weight, which is primarily their goal as to why they're sitting so low. But it just simply stops working. So yeah, it's such an important point. So number 4 on the list is too much cardio. I feel like we're going to be speaking to a certain generation a lot here. Again, it's very commonplace still, but it does fit into that framework of that particular age bracket that I know that we see clinically. And unfortunately, I think it's because it got lumped in with this whole concept of like restriction, and burn. So there's still such a strong thought pattern that cardio is about burning. It's like you're sweating and you're burning and you're like breaking down all that fat and you're like something's melting off you. Like it's such a weird misconception. So the problem, like cardio definitely is an energy expenditure. So yes, of course, there is walking and there is running and there's elliptical and there's swimming and there's all these different forms of cardio. So a moderate amount of cardio, definitely ideally combined with strength work, which is going to be way more beneficial, is going to have the best results. But the problem is when we do too much cardio. Things like strength training, which are obviously people hear so much about that now. Strength training is great because it's anabolic. It builds muscle. It's building that metabolism, and it's creating that metabolic response we want to rev everything up. And that's why it works so profoundly for women with respect to building muscle, but also helping with fat loss. But cardio, particularly excessive cardio, is the opposite. The more cardio that you do, the body will respond smartly, because if you are doing excessive amounts, it doesn't want to just keep burning all of its stores. Like it's just counterproductive and it's going to be in a really dangerous state. So what it will do in response to excessive cardio is downregulate again. It will be like, let's just slow everything down. So the more you keep flogging your body with cardio, it'll actually have that opposite response. It'll also, if you're not looking after yourself as you are doing your cardio, or if you're increasing your cardio and you're going too hard, it will have a really negative feedback onto your hormones with respect to what we're talking about before. So how it can affect, particularly for women and men, but particularly women, with our sex hormones and our thyroid. And again, it becomes this like cascade of effects. So trying to lose weight through excessive cardio is definitely a road that you don't want to go down. A moderate amount, what's a moderate amount? It's like finding out what that looks like for you. But for most people, it might be a couple of times a week or a walk a day. It ideally is married with strength training, because that's where we're going to get those more positive feedback systems applied, which will give us the results we're after. So cardio, lovely. Love your walks, love your swims, even your runs, whatever they are. But I think most people listening could also understand, if they thought about it within themselves and were true to themselves, if they are intentionally really burning their candle at both ends with how much they're doing their cardio and how much, when we use that word, flogging themselves, versus if they're just doing an enjoyable walk on a daily basis, or having maybe like a 4 or 5K run a couple of times a week. Anything you wanted to add to that one?
No, I think you've summed it up really well. I think you did touch on it, but yeah, I see a lot of clients, I guess, don't really understand the importance of that strength training, and that's why they tend to go more cardio. But yeah, really highlighting the fact that when you are doing a lot more of that strength training and building that lean muscle mass, you're actually, when you build a lot more of that lean muscle mass, your ability to metabolize fat is actually a lot higher. So the more you basically burn more fat, the more lean muscle mass you have. So that's why it's really important to build a lot of that lean muscle mass. And that often with excessive cardio can get depleted if you're not optimizing your nutrition and focusing on that anabolic state as well. So yes, well said. So moving on to number 5, I think we're up to number 5. And that is not assessing for any underlying causes that may be contributing to the weight picture or inhibiting weight loss. So again, coming back to that sort of initial, I've just got to cut my calories, reduce my food intake, and really amp up the exercise. And for a lot of people, that can be effective. But for a lot of other people, there's still a lot going on in the background or underlying causes that may be, I guess, a part of the picture when it comes to weight loss. So that can be things like hormonal concerns. So whether or not it's something like PCOS, for example, it could be thyroid-related conditions. So hypothyroidism is one that we see quite often in clinic, where it's basically this everything really just slows down in the body, including your metabolism. So having a look and I guess paying attention to other symptoms that you might have, getting some pathology done, getting functional testing done, just getting a really broad overview of your overall case. And again, this is where working with someone like a qualified nutritionist, for example, can give you that perspective and start to pick up on, hang on, there might be more going on here that may be A, causing your weight gain, and B, inhibiting your ability to lose weight. And I think this also comes into play when it may not be a health condition, but it may be a particular life stage. So, for example, we're starting to see a lot more women in that perimenopause and even post-menopause sort of stage where, unfortunately, weight management can become a little bit more complex. So I guess, yeah, bringing a bit of attention to any underlying health causes, or are you at a particular life stage that may make this process a little more complex for you?
Yeah, exactly. And it is an area, I like that you said that, with regards to practitioner support, that is huge for us as far as how we can investigate and help support these different factors that may be another layer with respect to metabolic health. And we definitely are seeing a lot with that perimenopause space in the clinic. So, number 6 on the list, probably, dare I say, one of the hardest ones when it comes to the challenge of working with weight loss, is not creating change for the long term. So what we mean by this is the classic, I want to lose weight and I want to lose weight now. I've got, say, a wedding in 12 weeks. I've got an event, like it's all guns blazing and it's short term. It's like, I just need to lose this weight now. And it's why diets that are out there are just so attractive, and it's a lucrative industry because everyone wants a quick fix. And the problem with that is that rarely, and I think there's a good example just popped into my mind. I don't know if you've seen it, Christine, that documentary that was released on The Biggest Loser. Did you see that?
Oh,
It was
yes.
like a
Yeah. Oh, I
retrospective on
think
The
I
Biggest
saw.
Loser.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a very classic example of obviously very extreme weight loss, but the rebound of weight gain and just how common it is. So when we just focus on short term, we can apply ourselves, like most humans are pretty good at applying like very strict guidelines and protocols for a short amount of time, but it's not realistic long term. So what will often happen if we do things in an extreme way, we won't be able to stay with that and we'll just bounce back into old habits. And then also if we lose weight in a very extreme way, then our metabolism will absolutely freak out. And that's what reminded me of that documentary where you're seeing such extreme weight loss where the body will rebound very quickly and put that weight back on. So realistically, the best way to approach all of this is thinking about the long term. If you want to make changes truly and keep that weight off, you have to think about how you're going to do this long term. And that means applying all of the areas that we've talked through today, plus more to come. It is really thinking about how can I make sustainable change now that is going to allow me to slowly and surely lose weight, not too quickly, because again, that really quick, rapid weight loss is where it's more dangerous as far as how that'll affect your metabolism. But when I often say to clients, like, if I can get you losing even just like a kilo a month, like I'm stoked. And they'll be like, oh my God, that's so slow. But if we can get you just slowly and methodically losing weight and your metabolism, often say to them, I use the phrase, it's your metabolism's coming along for the ride. Like everything is adjusting as we're moving through that. And you're setting up this whole new structure of learning like what works best for you and new patterns in how you're eating and maybe what your energy expenditure is and how you're training and all the things we've talked to today. But you have to think about this as a long-term change and something that you want to do and are able to do for life. Because if you don't, there's a massive percentage, I wish I knew it off the top of my head, but I'm going to put a ballpark out there. It's at least 90, somewhere in the 90% of rebound, which is pretty sad. And I wish that people would consider that more when they jump into this area. So yeah, I think it's one that I'm particularly passionate about. And it's, I guess, why, unfortunately, the way we approach weight loss isn't as sexy because we're like, hey, let's like help you lose weight for the long term, but not like 5 kilos in 2 weeks.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the way you've just said that, it reminds me of this analogy that you might have heard before. And it's, I don't know the statistics, but it's like something of like, I don't know, let's say it's 80% of people that win the lottery lose it within the first couple of years of winning it. And it's like, because they're not used to managing such, massive amounts of money, it's like they just can't hold on to it. And and I think that's quite similar in this weight loss picture. It's like, well, for the majority of people, when they come to us and they do have weight concerns, there's a reason for that. It's their lifestyle, it's their diet, it's XYZ that's led them to this point. So if you're approaching this logically, you can't expect the lifestyle that you're living to return to that and then maintain a different reality, if that makes sense. So you do need to, if you want to be the person that is of XY weight, you need to change the way in which you're living your life to mirror that. And unfortunately, it's not always what everyone wants to hear, but you are going to have to do something different long term if you're going to want to sustain those results. So anyway, get off my little high horse on that one, but it just, it really gets me on that one. So moving on to number 7. And I guess we've kind of touched on this a little bit, but it's coming back to that rapid weight loss. So as you were saying, you really like, slow and steady overall. And I think that's, I suppose it's just really following on from that and emphasizing that as much as that we do want you to do it in the long term, and we really want you to implement this from a lifestyle perspective, there are risks when it comes to losing weight at such a rapid rate. And that can include like hormonal dysregulation. That's a really big one. I'll often see women lose their periods, lose their menstrual cycle, their fertility will be interrupted. You can have impacts on your bone health. Muscle loss is another big one as well. So like we were touching on earlier, if you're wanting to really rev up your metabolism to really support this weight loss, we want that lean muscle mass there. However, when you are cutting weight too much too quickly, you will unfortunately see a decline in a lot of that lean muscle mass as well. So really what you're wanting to see when you're saying you want to lose weight is that you want to lose fat, not just weight. So that's, yeah, if you can bear that in mind as a bit of a consequence with losing too much weight too quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Love it. Love it. Love it. Number 8 is not addressing stress. This one's a hard one. I think actually, yeah, if we had to pick something off the list besides what we're just talking about as far as those long-term changes, stress is always hard in every facet of health because it's just so hard to control in a lot of cases. But
Yeah.
definitely being aware and identifying how much stress you have in your life is important here. The more chronic stress you have, and chronic meaning ongoing, the more that will have an impact on your cortisol. And the more rampant your cortisol is, the more we have the propensity to deposit fatty tissue or fatty tissue or even visceral fat, so fat around our organs. So there will be that increased fat deposition that will occur. But the other thing with cortisol, when it's in such a heightened state, it has the ability to disrupt the thyroid function too, as far as conversion of hormones. So it's multifaceted. There's more complexities to it, but for the sake of today and moving through these points quickly, we want you to think about how this chronic stress has an impact on your cortisol. And basically that really high rampant cortisol is going to be more inhibitory to your ability for your metabolism to work effectively. And also it's going to be more encouraging of that fatty tissue deposition, and make it harder for you to shift it overall. It's just why I say it's hard, of course, like how to address this is not always so simple. So we'll often talk to our clients about strategies to reduce stress, but for sake of also what we've talked about with other areas, we have to be realistic with ourselves and think about where is this stress coming from? What can I manage? And also often with stress, we can feel really helpless and like, oh, my job's just too much, or this is too much, or I just don't have control over this. But there can be ways that we can look at mitigating the stress somewhat, or things that you can do through the day to try and break the stress cycle. And they can be small things that can over time have a big impact. Again, I understand that it's not always that simple, but it is definitely something that we see quite strongly at the clinic, not only having an effect on weight loss, which is the topic of today, but profoundly on health overall. So that's my 2 bits on stress.
Yeah, it's a massive one, and I think a lot of people, it's sometimes it's a hard one to bring up in consultations because I mean everyone's stressed these days, but it's that whole, well, yeah, I know I'm stressed, but it's just part of daily life, and it's not like we're saying you need to eliminate stress. It's just like how, like you said, how can we mitigate the impact of it for you and create subtle changes that do pay off in the long term. So moving on to number 9, and no one's going to like me for this one, but we're talking alcohol. And I find that this one is one that's, I guess in some ways it surprises me that it is overlooked a lot of the time. And I'd suppose because it's not a food, maybe, I don't know why, but it does tend to get overlooked a lot of the time. And yeah, unfortunately, I mean, even if we're looking at from an energy density perspective, again, coming back to calories, like you're not getting any nutrition from alcohol. Obviously, it's not giving you any sense of satiety or supporting your metabolism, but you are getting that, hit of additional calories, or empty calories, as they say. But then there's also the flow and effect of the actual alcohol itself in terms of how it affects your metabolism, how it affects sleep is a big one as well, which we'll touch on shortly. And then also just in terms of your detoxification pathways. So yeah, unfortunately, there's no real safe level of alcohol, across the board, but especially when it comes to weight management. And again, it's not about, cutting alcohol out completely for some people. There are ways that we can minimize it, but I did just, I guess, want to include it here because it is one that I see a lot of clients overlook how significant a role alcohol does play into the weight management picture.
Yeah, no, I so agree. I might have told this story on the podcast before, just quickly, but I remember a client many, many years ago who primarily was seeing me for weight loss, and she had been going pretty well, but we hit a plateau, and I'd been saying to her many times that she needed to consider the wine she was having every night. And she was like, oh, it's just, one or two glasses, like it helps me unwind. Like, surely, she's like, surely, as you just said, like it's just wine, like it can't be having that much of an effect. And I made a deal with her where I said, all right, well, what about between now and when I see you next, which was say 3 or 4 weeks, maybe 4 weeks? I'm like, you cut the wine, and if you don't see any change, then I'm so happy for you to keep it up. And if you do see a change, that's great. And maybe that might encourage you to keep going with it. And she was like, all right, I'm up for the challenge. I think she really thought like nothing would happen. So she did it, and she came back, and she had significantly shifted that last bit of weight that she wasn't able to shift. And she was so shocked. And she was not only shocked by the weight loss, but by how she felt overall. Like she couldn't believe the impact it was having on her sleep, which, as you said, we're going to get into. Her sleep, her energy, like it was just such an eye-opener for her, and enough that even those 4 weeks, of course, were just an eye-opener to just go, well, why would I keep doing this? I'm not getting back on the wine.
Yeah.
So that was really cool.
And I think it's it's probably one that people don't want to consider at this time of year as well, as we lead into to sort of more of that festive season. But yeah, it's something to consider. And again, if it's something that you struggle with, working with somebody like a qualified practitioner can help to, I guess, navigate that for you and what's realistic, what are you having, how much are you having, what types are you having, are there other types, some better than others, that's where we can come into play and give you a bit of guidance around that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So number 10, not focusing on your protein and fats. So this ties into what we're talking about earlier, where I think number 1, we're talking about just being focused on calories and calories alone. And we see this a lot when we do have clients track where they may be hitting a certain amount of calories, but their protein intake is very low, their fat intake is really low, or they might have protein really low and fats really high. Like it can be skewed all over the place. But the more common, for the context of what we tend to see, is that it can be really low protein. And I know I see low fat. Well, actually, you know what? I see a lot of low fat in that classic generation we're talking about that are really scared of fat. And then I also see a higher fat intake in, I would say, a latter generation who have embraced the whole concept of like healthy eating, whole foods, and like trying to like do all the right things by what they see on social media. And their fat intake can actually be super high. So it's kind of interesting generationally. But generally, what will often happen here is that if we're not getting enough protein, we're not getting that satiety, and fat will also do this too. So a classic low intake of good quality fats and protein with meals will just leave you feeling hungry and not satiated. And then that can lead to what we were talking about earlier too, where you can end up binging or just snacking, and then the intake overall ends up creeping up. It's really, really classic pattern. Honestly, we see this a lot with initial clients, and we don't even need them to be tracking. We can just look at a dietary intake and just see the classic just way the structure of the day goes, where by the afternoon they're like hitting up all the snacks, and then dinner's the biggest meal of the day, and they might be going for seconds, and then they're going for evening supper or dessert or whatever you want to call it. So it's a really classic pattern that we can see, and often just by focusing on protein intake at the start of the day and enough of those good fats does the trick. But I definitely would say for those two that are in those sort of latter generations, that it's also a space for where fat consumption can sometimes creep the other way. So where there's like lots of snacking on nuts and use of nut butters and coconut yogurts and so forth. So all beautiful foods, but I've definitely seen clients who are just using those in abundance and wondering why things aren't shifting. And again, just by like getting these back into like a more moderate intake, just by some simple changes in portions, can be all that is needed. So yeah, protein and fat are an important one for us to consider as far as those macronutrients.
Absolutely. Excellent. Well, I was going to talk a little bit about sort of low fat and low sugar intake when it comes to certain foods, but I do feel like we've kind of covered that. So I'm going to go rogue here for number 11. And I've just been thinking about I've got two clients actually in mind that we've been working on from a weight perspective, and that is becoming aware and paying a lot more attention to, I guess, two things on this point. Is one, the environment that you're in. So looking at I guess, who are the people that you're surrounded by? What sort of work you're doing? What's your relationship with food in terms of other people that you're surrounded by encouraging a healthy lifestyle? Are they more encouraging that you eat certain foods, or have potentially a less healthy relationship with food and so on? One client of mine, she recently went traveling with some family, and it was actually her children she went away with, and the children had like a really healthy lifestyle. They basically followed like a really healthy diet. They were really active, and so just by nature, she ate a lot of the same foods that they were preparing, and had a different setting in terms of not only the types of foods that she was eating, but the way she was eating, in terms of not overeating or not using it as a sort of an emotional crutch and things like that. And she was actually quite surprised. She's like, I wasn't craving sugar after dessert. I wasn't, like searching for that second portion and things like that. She's like, I was so much more emotionally regulated and getting joy from being with the kids and my grandchildren and things like that I just wasn't seeking out that sort of that dopamine hit, or that sort of that sweet treat, because she was emotionally and from a nervous system perspective a little bit more regulated. So it's kind of two things in that. It's like, one, assessing your environment and who are the people you're surrounded by. Is there an emotional element, a psychological element here that needs to be addressed, which basically all of the clients that I see, there's certainly an element of that we need to work through. But then also just getting really clear on, like, what are your habits when it comes to eating and food? Like, are you someone that lives alone and that you're seeking that sort of basic, connection, whether or not it's with food or that hit of dopamine and so on. So it's a big topic to unpack, but I just thought it would be an important one to throw in there and give some thought to, what's your relationship like with your eating environments, the people you're surrounded by, and then also that sort of emotional, psychological side of eating as well can be quite often overlooked as a big factor.
Really good point. Quite a deep, complex one too, that we'll often see with clients underlying the surface, and can be something we can have a discussion about, but may also be really helped by outside sources as far as speaking to therapists that really work in this area too. Number 12, we've alluded to this a few times already, is actually sleep. So Poor sleep, unfortunately, has quite a big impact in this area. I always remember seeing a study where participants enrolled were divided into two groups as usual, and one of them were, I guess, poor sleepers in general, and then they had the secondary group where I actually can't remember whether I imagine, gave them something to elicit good quality sleep. And over the weeks ahead, they had the same dietary intake. And essentially what they found is that the people that had good quality sleep were experiencing weight loss. And then the people who were having poor sleep were either experiencing no weight loss or even weight gain. And I just remember just being like, wow, that is so just fascinating. And you know it, but to just see that in a study is pretty profound. So sleep is so important for so many factors. But when we have poor sleep, I'm sure we can all relate to this. Our energy is super, super poor. And the poorer our energy is, the more we are often going to have cravings, and our appetite will be a lot higher because our body, again, like it knows what's going on a lot of the time. It's like, oh my God, I'm struggling. I need literally more fuel to like help keep everything moving here. So we're craving more food in general. So our appetite can go up. We can crave a lot more sugars and processed foods because they're those quick hit energy foods. So unfortunately, the lack of sleep and the constant lack of sleep tends to result in increased food consumption and increase of those more sort of sugary, high calorie foods. And the problem is when you're in a cycle of sleep like this, that tends to be the outcome a lot of the time. Now, it's interesting though with what I was just saying, because there's also a study there where it's like, well, hang on, Jessica, no one was eating anything different. The problem also is that the lack of sleep definitely impacts that metabolism overall. I actually can think of my lovely mother who has had insomnia for years and years and years on end. And this is something that she has struggled with by generally eating a good whole food diet, and wanting to, sorry mum for talking about you on the podcast if you're listening, but wanting to lose weight, but struggling so hard with being able to do so because her metabolism has just become so dysregulated by her years and years of poor sleep. So it's a protective mechanism. Like the body is down regulating things for a reason. And unfortunately, the more that this goes on, the more it can have a severe impact on our weight. Beyond, I mean, there's so many things beyond that with poor sleep. It's just like a horrible, horrible cycle. But just improving that sleep quality will have a big effect on better metabolic performance, but also we'll see with clients how it will have an impact on improving their general appetite throughout the day, where it's not swinging all over the place and they're not getting those cravings. So that's my tidbit on sleep. I don't know if there was anything you wanted to add to that.
No, I think that's perfect. I think it's just important to emphasize that it's kind of twofold. It's like the effects of sleep, in itself can disrupt that metabolic rate and you really inhibit that weight loss, but then it's also what that lack of sleep leads you to do from a behavioral perspective as well. So that increase in appetite and more of those sugar cravings as well. So yeah, it's a big one. And then I also think it's kind of like this loop. It's like the more then you eat those types of foods, the more it disrupts your sleep and so on and so forth. So
true. Yeah.
Yes. All right, so number 13. So we've kind of touched on, I guess, exercise a little bit earlier, but one point I did just want to mention is going, again, with the exercise, going too much too quickly. And I see this can be an issue from, I guess, both a cardio perspective, but even from a strength-based perspective as well. So if you're going to start to engage in more physical activity in terms of supporting weight loss, I think that's wonderful and it's really, really helpful, but do so in a moderate way, because if you're going too hard too quickly, you are going to more often than not see a pretty steep incline in your appetite, which, it's a good sign because it means that the metabolism is responding. But if we do that too much too quickly, the flow-on effect of that is, well, your appetite's increased, so then your food intake is going to be increased as well, which then in some ways can mitigate some of that weight loss that you're hoping to achieve. So I think that, certainly exercise is important, but just the way that you go about it, especially if you're not someone that has been exercising previously and this is quite new to you, a lot of people, like even from a diet perspective, they just go all in. So if you can just, bear that in mind, that it is something important to include, but just moderate that, and then we can slowly start to ramp it up to support that metabolism without it having a negative impact on your diet.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I love too with this point, which relates back to a lot of what we've said earlier, as that appetite is increasing and you do have that increased demand for food and fuel, knowing how to add the right types of foods. Because if you're not adding food in the correct way, that's where you start getting these swinging cravings and you're not satiated and so forth. So responding with the right amount of increased protein and fats and the carbohydrates and like getting everything nicely balanced is so crucial, because as soon as you don't have that in check, it's just all over the place as far as like how that metabolism ends up again back in that dysregulated space, and you're consuming like a full packet of chips out of the cupboard, family size, followed by God knows what else that you can find when you're in a ravenous state of increased appetite. Speaking from experience.
And I think it then also has that flow-on effect as well, because it's like, I see them, a lot of clients are kind of caught off guard by it. It's like, oh my God, my appetite's increased, and they go and then kind of gorge on food. And then it's like this loop. It's like, oh no, I've fallen off the wagon, so I've got to then go and restrict now. And it's like, that's where that sort of all or nothing approach can kind of come into play. So yes, moderation, not sexy, but is important.
Yes. Now, final one, which we mentioned in a way with respect to alcohol, but it goes beyond that, is liquid calories. This is interesting with respect to not only how we spoke about the example of the client with the wine, and as Christine was talking about with alcohol in general, but we need to think about what we're drinking as well as what we're eating. So things like juices that we're consuming, or different types of lattes that are out there are a classic example. Like, again, in the sort of health space, there's a lot of trend for all these different types of, whether it's say your matchas, and matchas at the moment are having a moment. So it's like your strawberry matcha and your, God knows what, there's vanilla matchas. There's so many of them. Your turmeric lattes, your mushroom lattes, or just generally like how many coffees you're having during the day, and like how much like milk is in that, like it, how many sugars are you adding, like it all adds up. So again, this is a place that we need to consider. I've had clients for sure here where we have just made changes with their morning tea habits around their size of their lattes that they're getting, or changing the type of drink that they're getting, or swapping it for a particular type of snack. And that has been enough to create that small deficit of where they feel stuck. But it is an interesting one, because a lot of people don't think about the liquids that they're consuming. I guess I didn't even mention soft drinks. Like, I guess we definitely see some clients too, even with soft drinks, that are just, I think fundamentally people are like, oh, I know this isn't good for me, but they don't really think of it as factors like, oh, I'm also consuming this and it's contributing to how much I'm taking in overall. So it's the last one on the list, but definitely an important one.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that obviously there's, I guess, that energy density to it that a lot of people sort of overlook. But then it's like, well, also not only from a caloric perspective, it's like, what's in these types of drinks or beverages, that then, like, what's the effect of that in itself? So is it going to be, a healthy fruit juice that's got as much sugar in it that a can of Coke does, what's that doing to your metabolism, to your sugar cravings, to your blood sugar management as well. So it's kind of twofold that can be overlooked as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, that sums up our list, 14, big 14 mistakes to avoid when trying to lose weight. So hopefully that has been helpful for you. I hope you can also see how everything is very integrated. So there's a lot of these different points leading into each other, and that's for a reason, because the body works as a systemic unit, and how hormones are functioning is going to have an impact on XYZ. And obviously we've talked about multiple factors with like calories and macros and so forth, but it really is synchronized. And for us, the beauty of it is that it is quite easy once we have a client in front of us to identify maybe the main pain points on this list and to help you navigate that. And hopefully also you've seen how passionate Christine and myself are in respect to one of the points about this longevity in this space of weight loss, like truly helping you get those results, but maintaining them in a healthy way. So if it's something, of course, that you're interested in, please reach out to us at the clinic. Christine does a lot in the weight loss space. We actually also have a weight loss nutrition package that she offers, which is really great, that you can buy as a bundle, and it actually includes a meal plan, and that's all customized to you, which is fantastic. And again, it's going to cover in detail everything that we've talked about. And if you have any questions or queries for myself or particularly Christine, I'm sure she'd be more than happy to answer those if you want to slide on into her DMs. Is that okay, Christine?
Yes, of course.
And I think just lastly, we always say this, but it means a lot if you could share this podcast, particularly a topic like this, because as we said, there's a lot of saturation out there on the quick fixes. And this is really the conversation that needs to be had more thoroughly. So please share it in your socials, share the episode with a friend, and be amazing if you could just take the time, even if you just pause us right now and go and head over and give us a 5-star rating, because that means the world. But otherwise, thanks so much, Christine, for jumping on today. It's been heaps of fun.
No, thank you for having me. It's a very enjoyable topic for me to talk about. And I know it can seem like it's not groundbreaking, but I think that when you really start to look at these particular points and then have a look at where you might be on your weight loss journey, then there's hopefully some little nuggets of gold in there for you if this is something that you're wanting some support around.
Perfect. Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you so much to everyone for listening, and we will catch you next time on the show. Bye.